might notice we're pretty durable.
Still hurts.
A police officer named Nick Walker is killed on the job. Since he has the proper skills as a cop, he's spared judgment and recruited for the Rest in Peace Department, R.I.P.D for short, and partnered with an Old West lawman named Roy to hunt people who have escaped judgment and still linger on Earth. As our good friend E-Rod over at Channel Awesome pointed out,
what a blatant, pathetic, embarrassing ripoff of Good vs. Evil.
I've never seen that show, and R.I.P.D is actually based off a comic of the same name, so maybe the comic ripped off Good vs. Evil, I don't know. But either way, I haven't seen or read either of those, so I'm coming into this with a fresh perspective on what, to me, is a new idea. Although this is a whole lot like Men in Black. The Good. Since members of the R.I.P.D are in fact deceased, they have different identities when they walk around on Earth so that nobody recognizes them. Most of the time, the humor that comes from these disguises is very good. The R.I.P.D is composed entirely of dead cops from different periods of history. They are hired for the R.I.P.D not only because many souls tend to linger on Earth and need to be taken care of, but it's also a 100-year sentence that postpones Judgment Day. I found this to be a clever idea to have a whole host of people who are qualified to do this kind of work. Jeff Bridges is the actor who plays Roy, who was partnered with Nick after Nick dies and joins the R.I.P.D. He was no doubt the best part of the movie, and I want you to keep that in mind as we get into the other categories, because this movie would have been downright intolerable without Jeff Bridges. The Iffy. Since the R.I.P.D is composed of cops from history, I thought it a missed opportunity that they didn't include some kind of historical cameo of a famous police officer from days gone by. Granted, I cannot think of any myself, so I'm not sure what they would have done. I thought it a little odd that R.I.P.D officers can have their term of service extended. I always thought of the R.I.P.D as the second chance, but if they extend their term, doesn't that give them more chances to redeem themselves, giving them thus a third, fourth, fifth, and so on chance? Even though that question still lingers in my mind, the movie does paint a term extension as a punishment, and I can't imagine that hunting demons is a very glamorous job. The Bad. Ryan Reynolds. Now, I want to make it clear right now, I don't hate Ryan Reynolds at all. He's just not a very good actor in this movie. His voice tone and his expression on his face never exactly changes to show much emotion throughout the entire movie. He gets sucked into places like an ominous cloud of death or the R.I.P.D offices. These things should be blowing his mind into the underworld, if you'll pardon my pun, but this stays pretty much the same the whole movie. If that doesn't kill your investment in the movie, there's very little chemistry between characters, even between Jeff Bridges and Ryan Reynolds, who have the most screen time together. I feel like they tried to introduce an element of Jeff Bridges' character is from another time, you know, the Old West, things were very dark, gritty, and messy back there, whereas Nick is a cop from the modern day where things are operated much, much differently. But the main thing they butt heads over is normal police business. Emphasizing the conflict between those two work styles would have been very interesting, I think. But Ryan Reynolds spends half the time whining that he doesn't have his girlfriend anymore and he can't even say a proper goodbye to her because he's dead. Granted, I can imagine that being a very sad scenario, but what about Jeff Bridges? There should have been a scene in this movie where Jeff Bridges got to talk about the people he cared about back in his time period. But you know what? He had to get over it, because he was dead, they were still alive, and all he could do now was protect the world from demons. This would be a great character scene because then every R.I.P.D officer would be somewhat relatable just by the simple concept of everybody has to get over this at some point. They are dead. They have to focus on the job now and their own redemption. They've been given this second chance to do some good in the world, and you should take the opportunity to do that, even if it means you have to let go of the things you once loved in your past life. But no, instead of getting a deep, meaningful scene like that, we got something near the end of the movie just to say, yep, that happened. Okay, that's another checklist we can cross off in the script. Now let's move on to the end of the movie. Though some of the disguise-related stuff was good, there are certain aspects of this movie's humor that stops being cute after about 20 minutes. And it sucks because it's not a certain sense of humor. It's a couple of running jokes that just never decide to die. The story is told in a very clumsy fashion. There are so many plot devices, some of which really don't make sense, and then there's contrived ways to get certain characters into situations just to keep them in the plot because they're required to be there. There's a plot hole near the end of the movie that could have stopped the entire climax if it weren't for a lapse in common sense. The verdict? This movie had an interesting premise, but Jeff Bridges was the only thing about it that succeeded. The humor is weird and falls flat pretty quickly. The characters were bland, they have no chemistry with each other, the story was told clumsily. It was just a big letdown for a movie that I was actually looking forward to a good deal. This is Detective Steve, and I hope Good vs. Evil is better, because I might want to check it out someday.